Ready?
Sure.
You
Yes.
don't look like you're ready. The time is 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I think instead of, I want to switch this up a little bit and do the motion that everybody can join remotely. I don't see that on this one.
I'm sorry.
Am I missing it? Is it just isn't on there? But
just not on there.
let's start with that. And do you want to word the motion for us?
Alderman
Janine?
Moyer actually has it.
Alderman Moyer has it? Okay, Alderman Moyer, let's start with that.
I would like to make a motion to approve the remote electronic attendance of Second Ward Alderman David Parker, Third Ward Alderman Mike Wendt, Sixth Ward Alderman Kevin Schoonmaker, Seventh Ward Alderman Mike Waldron, Alderman at Large Sonia Berg at the Committee of the Whole and City Council meetings April 21, 2020.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Moyer and a second by Alderman Potter. Roll. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much. And then we're going to begin this evening with mayor's board appointments. So I'd be looking for your support on these appointments. Is there a preference if we go through them one at a time, or would you like to do them all together?
All together.
Does anyone have any concerns about any of the appointments? If not, I'll do them all together. So the first appointment is Kevin Schoonmaker to the Firefighters Pension Board for a full 3-year term to expire April 30th, 2023. The second is Will Tolmie to the Police Pension Board for a full 2-year term to expire April 30th, 2022. Janet Zam to the Youth Commission for a full 3-year term effective April 1st, 2019 and expiring March 31st, 2022. Jan Erickson Verum to the Youth Commission for a full 3-year term to expire March 31st, 2023. And Elizabeth Finch to the Youth Commission for a full 3-year term to expire March 31st, 2023. I'd be looking for your support on these appointments.
So the motion.
Motion to approve Parker.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker and a second by Alderman Moyer. Is there a discussion on this? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much for supporting those appointments, and thank you to the people involved for their volunteerism. The next item on the agenda is a proclamation, and I will turn that over to Janine to read.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a proclamation for Earth Month. Whereas Earth Day was first celebrated on April 22nd, 1970, with the goal of inspiring an appreciation of our nation's natural resources through conservation and protection. Whereas the celebration of this day marks an annual review of and commitment to the principles of that first Earth Day. Whereas the global community now faces extraordinary challenges such as environmental degradation, global health issues, climate change, food and water storages. Whereas a green economy can be achieved on the individual level through education, public policy, and consumer activism campaigns. Whereas the City of Moline celebrates Earth Day by extending it to the month of April in recognition of the commitment to environmental stewardship. Now therefore, Stephanie Acree, Mayor of Moline, does hereby proclaim the month of April 2020 as Earth Month.
Thank you, Janine.
Thank you.
Are there any questions on the agenda this evening?
Mayor Acree, this
Yes.
is Dave Parker.
Hi.
Is everybody muted? Because I'm getting like a feedback and it's kind of hard to hear all the words. Just be sure you are, if you could, please.
Sorry, there is a little chirping. I think we can see it from our drop down, can't we?
The only two people that are muted are Berg and Lair.
Alderman Berg, you, I don't think are muted, and who is the second one?
Brian.
Oh, Brian, would you mind muting your computer? We don't know who the culprit is, but if everybody could stay on mute unless they're talking, that'd be helpful. Thank you, everybody. Is there any other questions on the agenda? Oh, JD, do you have something?
I was going to offer up one thing before we talk about agenda items 1, 2, and 3. I just wanted to tell you that Carol and I, those are the projects that we told you, we're projecting some shortfalls in the home rule tax and the utility tax. And Carol and I will be kind of presenting to you on some of the options that we think where you could recapture those through revenue anticipation notes or something like that during our presentation tonight.
Great. Anything else? I did want to get some guidance from the council on your opinions. So we are trying something different tonight. We have given the allowance of individuals to submit their public comments ahead of time to be read during the council meeting. We have about 11 public comments this evening. Would you like to split those up and do some during the committee of the whole public comments and some during the agenda or the council meeting public comments? Would you prefer to have them all read together? And if so, which meeting do you want them read at? Anybody have any feedback? Anybody care? All right, I'm gonna split them up then if there's no concern about doing it that way. All right, let's begin on the agenda items. We have, as JD referenced, items 1, 2, and 3. The first agenda item is Project 1335, 19th Avenue Reconstruction, 13th Street to 14th Street. Joe Kuhlenbeck will be presenting this evening.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good, yeah. Our first project tonight is the 19th Avenue Reconstruction Project. Walter D. Laud was the most responsive bidder. Bids were opened on March 24th, 2020. They submitted the bid of $693,277.53. Laud is ready to proceed with this project. This project, if approved on the COW, is going to go straight to the council agenda. The reason for that is in order to give Laud the proper amount of time to complete the project before school begins at the end of the fall, we'd like to push it forward. He's ready to go as soon as Monday, if at all possible, but we do want to give him the best opportunity in the construction season to complete it in the time frame that we asked him to on this job specifically. Bids came in as expected, and staff recommends approval.
Motion to approve, Parker.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker and a second by Alderman Moyer. Is there any discussion on this item? Or any questions? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
We have one nay vote from Alderman Potter. The motion carries. The second item is Project 1337, 11th Street Reconstruction, 11th Avenue to 12th Avenue. Joe?
Yes, Project 1337, bids were opened on March 24th, 2020 as well. Porter Brothers Asphalt and Sealing Incorporated submitted the lowest bid, $447,691.84. They were the lowest and most responsible bidder. This is the first time they have submitted a bid and been awarded through the city of Moline and we did go through our due diligence. We had 3 references from past jobs that they've done with other municipalities. We did vest those references. Everything came. A message pop up there. Can everybody still see and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we did vest those references. Everything came back positive. We have confidence that they can complete the job as bid. Their lowest bid was $447,691.84. Staff does recommend approval on this project.
Motion to approve, Parker.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker. Thank you. We have a motion by Alderman Parker and a second by Alderman Moyer. Is there any discussion on this item?
Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor?
Alderman Witt?
JD, I was just checking to see if the proportions for CIF and the water and the WPC on this, did you guys look at that? Is based on some of the conversations we've had recently, is that still the proportionate allocation between those funds?
I've got a breakdown on that in an email. I'm certain it is, or if it, yeah, let me just stop and look. Laura went through all these projects and did the appropriation. I'll jump into my email and find that, give you that answer exactly. But I don't think it changed. I think it is all proportionate.
Okay, I mean, we have time. I'm going to support it, but just to verify that before we wind up putting on the council
Okay.
next meeting.
All right, I'll do that.
And I remember seeing that email as well. We've double checked that, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate.
Okay.
Is there any other questions? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
That motion carries with one nay vote from Alderman Potter. The next item is Project 1336, 38th Street Reconstruction, 10th Avenue to 11th Avenue. Joe.
Thank you, Your Honor. Bids for this job were opened on March 31st, 2020. Walter D. Law, Inc. submitted the most responsible bid of $1,119,192.75. There were some overages as budgeted. WPC and Storm have plenty of reserves to offset that overage. Some of the savings we've had on WPC side, again, we've been underbid on all of our other capital improvement projects so far, so there are funds there, and CIF went over as budgeted. All other projects have come in under. So staff does recommend approval of this project as well. If you have any questions,
Motion to approve Parker?
Motion, second, Alderman Berg.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker and a second by Alderman Berg. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
We have one nay vote this evening from Alderman Potter. Motion carries.
thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joe. The next item is the SFR grant acceptance. KJ Whitley. KJ, could you explain the acronym SFR? I think you may be on mute, KJ.
She's gone. Oh, there.
You have the mute controls, Mayor.
I do?
Yeah.
Oh. One moment. I get the mute controls. It's very exciting. One moment, KJ.
There, she's unmuted.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and happy birthday, Mayor.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. The SFR, Single Family Rehab.
Thank you.
We applied for this grant, and the Community and Economic Department applied for this grant probably about 4 months ago, and we're fortunate to get awarded a third time, in the amount of $416,500. This is a grant that we go in with East Moline and Silvis as well. So we're just looking for a motion to do all things necessary to execute all the documents for this grant.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion by
Second.
Alderman Moyer and a second by Alderman Potter. Is there any discussion on this item? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Mayor,
Oh, sorry.
Mayor,
We have a comment by Alderman Berg.
I'll be abstaining. I'm on the IDA board.
Thank you very much. We have one abstention. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? That motion carries with one abstention from Alderman Berg, board related.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, KJ. I believe we have one other this evening. I don't have it noted, but Chris, was this the time that you were going to speak to the enterprise?
Yes, Mayor, I do have an item here, and thank you. So, economic development staff, we've been approached by a developer working with a party that's interested in the former Sam's Club, and we, after meeting with the developer, we've come to an agreement that the enterprise zone would be a good tool to utilize for that property. Regardless of if this deal goes forward, if this project goes forward, that particular site, overnight, basically that site became a little bit more difficult to find users for, as we all know, just size and the way it's set up. So we have a project online right now that fits with one of our targeted industries. and could be great for the city. And so we just want to make sure, number one, the council's aware that this will be going to our enterprise zone board, which is kind of just representative of all the other quad cities that are part of the enterprise zone. So it'll be going to that board. And if that board chooses to approve it, it would come back to all the municipalities that make up the enterprise zone for final approval to add this territory to the zone. So we don't necessarily need a motion or anything tonight. We just wanted to let you know that this is out there happening, and if anybody had any issues with it, of course, please let us know.
Are there any comments by the council regarding this? We just don't want to have an awkward situation where we're asking the rest of the enterprise zone board to support something that we don't necessarily support ourselves. So if you have an issue with it, we should talk about that now. All right, Chris, I think you've got to go from us. Thank you.
Right.
Mayor, can I?
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yes,
Did he
Janine has
say-
a question.
Chris, did you say upon approval by the Quad City Enterprise Zone Board that this will be returning to council, or?
So yeah, there'll be an actual ordinance. There'll be an actual ordinance that's created that all the municipalities and Rock Island County, all their councils will have to pass that in order for it to be added. You will see if the board chooses to approve it. You'll see, I think, an application to the state, and this all has to come through all the municipalities before that application to the state.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Chris, for the presentation. I don't believe we have any other this evening, but we will be talking in an informational format about the COVID-19 update and the impacts to the budget. JD and Carol Barnes will be presenting this together.
Yes, Your Honor. And I'll step over here so I can spread my stuff out. And Carol, I think, is going to have her presentation that she sent you earlier. I think, Don, she got you putting that on the screen?
Sharing that now. Give me just a second, Judy.
Yes, and while Don's putting that on the screen, I just wanted to say just to give you a quick update, we are continuing to prepare the summary sheets that we talked about last week, showing the impact of all of our cuts on the residents. And we plan to distribute those prior to our 2-on-2s this next week. So thanks for your patience on that. Staff's working really hard to hopefully get them in a very good format for you prior to next week.
Got it.
All right, we can see your presentation.
Okay,
So we're
so
ready.
in front of you is our update. We've been giving these on a weekly basis, so this is our update here for April 21st. And we'll go to the first slide. And the first slide here, we're just going to review again, taking a look at the shortfalls across all of our major revenues. And a week ago, we talked about a shortfall of 5.8, and then the council had instructed us to take a look at a potential shortfall of 10 million, wanting to know what those types of impacts would be on the city as a whole. So I'm going to kind of concentrate on the $10 million scenario number 2. And this scenario assumes that we would be looking at approximately a 3-month stay-at-home scenario. That would have been starting from March to April to May to the very first part of June. And as you kind of look down those columns, you'll see shortfalls in revenues primarily ranging from about 20 to 50%. There are some that's a little bit lighter than that. But this is just a recap of our top 10 revenues. And to highlight a couple of them, if we take a look at our state sales tax, that very first row, we anticipate between the two scenarios that we presented last week that the decrease on our state sales tax would go from a 12% drop to a 20% drop, or about $2 million. And the next row is our home rule sales tax. And again, this is a little bit higher because the drop of the shortfall of projected 29%, because it does not include vehicle sales tax on vehicles. Another one, just to draw your attention, if you move down the row, is our motor fuel. The comptroller's office is going to be coming out, I think, by the end of this week or early next week. They kind of put a highlight out with an email that they are seeing significant shortfalls in the motor fuel tax fund. So because of that, we actually dropped that number down to 50%. And again, that's a very difficult one to wrap around without having more direction from the state. But based on the email that we had received, we did reduce that from a 13% a week ago down to 50% if indeed our stay-at-home stayed ongoing for 90 days. The next revenue stream that kind of we anticipate to take a drop is the hotel motel tax. And we've targeted a 54% drop under the $10 million scenario. Again, with our airport not having much activity and people just not traveling or moving around, we feel that that is a reasonable amount for hotel motel. So then if you just take a look all the way down to the bottom column, the bottom of that column, you'll see overall, and again, this is across all funds, we anticipate a $10 million drop to have about 11% impact on our revenues citywide. And that has increased from 5% here a week ago when we thought it was 5.8. I will point out of the 10 million, and we'll see that on the next page, out of the 10 million, it's the general fund that does take the primary hit on those shortfalls of revenue. Do you have any questions on the revenue sheet?
Parker does.
Alderman Parker?
So on the utility funds, when it's a $5.8 million shortfall revenue shortfall, we're only anticipating a $67,000, almost $68,000 lost revenue. But if it goes an extra month, we're going to expect $1.5 million in lost revenue. I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, I would, when you kind of go through the sheet. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you now.
I know that we did take a drill down, and we're actually probably a little bit light on the 5.8 scenario. As you recall, we lifted the water turnoffs that we're no longer turning them off, and we are having many calls for setting up payment plans. We are no longer charging delinquents through this process of being shut down. So as a result of a combination of all that, when we looked at everything in total, we feel that that number needs to be higher than the number that we had originally projected back in the 5.8. And again, it's just a difficult one to wrap around. The utility funds, we aren't addressing at length right now. Fortunately, they have very good fund balances, and so if we would end up and we would hit this $1.4 million, they would at least have the capacity to be able to continue operations. Does that help answer your question, Alderman Parker?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't understand exactly if, regardless if we're having a payment plan for them over a period of several months, how we're going to lose that much revenue, except for the fact that we don't have people staying at our hotels. It's the only thing I can kind of justify it in my head, but sometimes it takes me a long time to figure this out. So if everybody else is good with it, I just haven't kind of warmed up to it yet.
Yeah, and some of them, I think we're going to have some bad debt that we're going to be writing off with sewer and water especially. If this progresses for a long period of time, the bills are going to become so astronomical, we're kind of fearful that some people won't be able to make those payments. But Keith Verbeck, he is the wizard of coming up with our revenue stream. So if you have any further questions, I can sure run them by Keith, because I think he'll probably have a little better answer than what I have.
Carol, I may have missed it, but did you say when people are calling in for a payment plan, what the breadth is of what's being coordinated? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I'm not the ones actually taking the actual calls.
Okay.
But it's just as they know, we typically have a lot of requests for payment plans.
Oh, okay.
Just in the normal course of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And now with people out of jobs, they're worrying about their payments being late. And so they've been very happy when they hear that we're no longer charging penalties during this period. But they know that if they skip their payments, it's just going to continue to pile up. So they're asking in advance, if I go 3 and 4 more months out, will I be able to set up a payment plan? And we are saying that, yes, we will be willing to help them at that point.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
If there's no further questions
Your
on
Honor.
that one, we're going to, oh, go ahead.
I had a quick question. I know with scenario one, we said that like the total was 5.8 million, and that looks like the final number under scenario one under total major revenues. But then under scenario two, we're saying that it's $10 million, but the equivalent number in scenario two is 12.4 million. And so maybe you go up to the upper line, but it's still 10.4 million and would be 5.2 in scenario one. So I was just trying to understand what is it that bottom number, that 5.8 and the 12.4 that we're really talking about, or?
In total across all funds, it is 12.4. But on that second scenario, as you know, when we talk about transfers between funds and chargeback, like with our vehicles and whatnot, it accumulated to a great degree, and I'm going to talk about it here in a little bit, because we had some changes in the way we're going to do our internal service funds and our utility funds. So there was just a lot of different kinds of ins and outs that occurred on those internal service funds.
So would it be 10.4 is really the number off of this, and it would have been 5.2 or 5.3 under scenario one?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
And there were minor changes under that first scenario. It's kind of complicated to say when we're talking about 40 funds, so everything's kind of netted. But you're exactly right. We should probably compare more of the 5.2 to the 10.4.
Thank you, Carol.
Any other questions on that slide? If not, we'll go to the next one. And this is the slide now that'll kind of break the shortfalls down by fund. And I'm going to take you to the green bullet in the middle of the page, that 10.4 that we were just talking about. And then if you go back towards the left, you'll see the impact on our major funds, the general fund, Parks, Library, MFT, and the CIP. So that's the breakdown on those funds. Going across the other side, again, there's a lot of transfers in and out. So I'm not going to talk about those in length anymore unless you have some questions. But we're going to zero in on that very first box of the 10.4. So I'd like to start at the very first column in the blue under the general fund. And I'm going to walk you through here. We've got some preliminary unaudited numbers for the year end, December 31st. And we're very pleased to report that tentatively it looks like we're going to be close to $1 million in the black in that fund. And if you recall, when we did the amended budget back in December, we had thought we were going to be about at least $204,000 to the good. And we distributed those excess reserves. We had kind of earmarked those for some expenses. But out of that 957,000, then we've got the 204 that was already earmarked. And then last week, I think you recall, we do have an audit adjustment for our P25 expenses. We had budgeted them under 2019, but they were actually 2020 expenditures. So part of the excess of that $1 million is the $375,000 to properly expense that amount in 2020. So that does reduce that balance down. So the net excess then, after taking our $204,000, will still have the general fund going up $378,000 above and beyond that 204. So it's about just shy of 600,000 higher than where we had anticipated. And if we calculate that out, we now have 26.74%, or about 92 days in our cash reserves in the general fund. Again, these are preliminary. We've still got about a week and a half of field work with our auditors, but I think we're pretty safe to say that we're going to have some good reserves to be able to put back in that fund. So as we go down this page, we are now looking at the general fund at the $10 million scenario, having a projected revenue loss of $6,856,000. And I'm going to turn it over to JD, and he's going to walk you down where we have found cuts to help offset that $6.8 million over this last week.
Okay, thank you, Carol. So, as Carol said, so we've gotten to the point there where I think where she walked through and explained, I hope a little better, what we were talking about with that $374,000 audit adjustment that we had to make on that P25 prepayment. And so as we started out then this week, looking at trying to capture that $10 million shortfall, I know I sent a communication to you that we worked on looking at the different proposed cuts that we could make to the budget. And so that $1,922,950 that you see right underneath there on the cuts to date, these are proposals that we can make to you, considerations that we're going to talk about, and we'll give you, some more detail here later about what those include, but they incorporate the hiring freeze that the council took action on, the only using overtime for emergency, for police and fire and any emergency activities, non-essential expenditures, cut, removal of all the seasonals and different things like that. And like I say, we'll get into a little bit more of the detail as we go into that later. The next line down, and we'll talk about that, I'll get a little bit over further. We'll talk about MFT and CIP when I go over and come down the different columns. The next one down is a transfer of engineering salaries and benefits to utilities. And I know that you had instructed staff to come back and apply the different projects to the different utilities and the different funds that would be responsible for the different capital improvement projects. And what, with the budget configured the way it is, all the salaries and benefits that we're applying on the construction management and inspection side of those projects was still all expensed out of the general fund, the capital improvements fund. So what we've done through this exercise, identified that they were in there, and we took all the projects that have been bid and now considered for this year, and apply those to the stormwater utility, the water utility, and the wastewater utility appropriately, and carve those up. And I think it comes out to about 47.8% then of those salaries and benefits that'll be shifted over to the utilities. And that's a reflection of that. The proposed reduced transfer out to the library, if you remember, at their budget included that $414,825 transfer. And I think if Brian's on right now, Mayor, if you don't mind, maybe I'd ask him to jump in and he can kind of give you an update on that right now if you want.
I'd appreciate that.
So,
Brian, if you wouldn't mind, we haven't gotten an update since the library board met today, and we'd be interested to know the outcome of that meeting.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yes, this afternoon, the Library Board spent a good portion of their afternoon talking about this. And I did want to say thanks to JD and Allison for being there, for them throughout the meeting on such a busy day. As JD said, they did approve a budget with the general fund transfer of that $414,825 removed from the budget. And additionally, they did make a motion to spend that 2020 distribution of 4.25% from the Moline Foundation and give that to the city as well. After the meeting, they crafted a statement that they're going to be sending out to the media. In fact, I believe it probably went out to the media today. I'd be happy to take a few short snippets of that and just kind of read that to you if you'd like, so you know what they're thinking at this point. But basically, the Moline Public Library Board is working with the City of Moline officials to determine fiscal sustainability for library operations during the COVID-19 crisis and to create an operating model to implement post-COVID-19. In light of the fact that the library will continue to be closed short-term, coupled with the need to absorb budget shortfalls due to COVID-19, Moline Public Library staff will be laid off beginning Wednesday, April 22nd. Hope that this will be a short-term layoff and the library will reopen as soon as it's deemed safe to offer physical services again. So the board also did decide to meet more regularly. Currently, they have a regular meeting scheduled once a month, but they've indicated they would like to meet weekly so they could keep on top of this and monitor the situation. So we'll be working with them on that.
Brian, could you offer a couple of clarifications? One thing I wanted to ask about was the fund that's held at the Moline Foundation. I think it was 36,000. Is that right? That's going to be drawn out of that fund. Did I get that number right?
That's correct.
And so that 36,000, does that have a restriction that it must be applied to the mortgage that's associated with the library building, or was that restriction not actually a requirement?
No, in talking to the folks at the Moline Foundation over the past couple of weeks, it does not specifically have to be applied to the mortgage or to the debt service on the building, but that's what we would use to apply towards it.
Okay, that makes sense, and I'm sure that would be the plan. I wasn't sure if that restriction, I think I had heard that there was a restriction of that sort on that money. And then my other question, and maybe Margaret could provide some understanding to me of the nuance between layoff and furlough and what that means and what they qualify. Somebody is whistling, just so you know. Margaret?
So, yeah. Hello.
Hello.
So a layoff is what we are authorized to do via our management rights. So we are governed by the collective bargaining agreement, and to the extent that we can reduce salaries or similar issues, our only true authority is to lay off, which indicates an indefinite period of time in which an employee is on unpaid status with no set or definite date to return. And with a layoff, generally, it would include a severance of health insurance. And when I say that, I mean health insurance and other benefits would cease. So it's more like a separation. On the other hand, a furlough is generally considered a shorter period of unpaid leave with a more definite date to return, and during which an employee remains in employment status, but is not obviously collecting pay, and their benefits would be restored upon returning to work. So a furlough is it's a shorter period of time with more of a guarantee to return. Now we obviously we only had the ability to lay off, but certainly we are open to this discussions with the union and the obviously and the council to talk further about other options.
And what is are we posing an interaction with the union regarding this? Or
so
what's the next step?
Right, so we did notify the UAW, I believe on Monday, maybe on Friday. I'm a little fuzzy about dates these days, as I'm sure many are. We did notify them that the library board would likely turn to a layoff for at least the period of the stay-at-home order.
Thank you. Alderman Nguyen?
So was there any, and I don't want to cross any lines with negotiating with unions and those sorts of things, but was there discussion of a furlough, or is that just not I mean, I guess I was under the feeling that that was kind of the direction we were going towards with them. I understand that we, under our current union contract, the only absolute option we have is layoff. But did we go down that path with them regarding furlough? And
So until the library board made a decision or gave direction, we thought that it was appropriate to only give them a heads up about what might be coming. Now, I think that we're planning on talking about this in much greater depth in executive session.
Are there any other questions for Brian? Seeing none, thank you, Brian, for the update. JD?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So coming down to the next line, I'm just going to skip over that one for a second, but the transfer in from park savings, I'll get down to that in a little bit more detail here in a minute when I go over to the next row. You can see the next one, staffing. And again, what Margaret said, we intend to go into executive session tonight to talk to you about, some of these different things in this category and some of the different things I think that we're expecting to talk with you about. Carol wants to jump in and talk here about the next internal service funds and that, and then I'll jump back in and take over.
Okay. Last week, council had directed me to take a look at 3 specific internal service funds. And so over the course of the last week, I worked with Sarah Mark, the interim fleet manager, and I had JD put his public works hat back on. And we pounded through a 5-year cash flow on each one of the funds. And what we determined was a couple of things. And I'm going to be bringing an actual policy for you in more depth within the next couple of weeks, and it'll be across all the internal service funds. But what we have decided right now to do is twofold. Number one, we're going to bring the fund balances of the fleet and facility down into the 25% range of fund balance to expenditures. Bring it down into that range, and that is their operating budget as well as vehicle replacements. And during the 5-year plan that we're going to show you when we put the policy together, you'll see that revenues and expenditures of both replacement of vehicles, replacement of assets, plus the operating, we have offsetting revenues and expenditures that balance themselves pretty much out. There's going to be a few little peaks and valleys, but pretty much keeping at a 25% level. Also, as a part of that, we did talk, like JD mentioned, regarding the engineering salary regarding projects. And we would like to recommend for council as well to consider having vehicle purchases and any type of building improvements, instead of running through these internal service funds, being directly spent out of each of the 4 appropriate enterprise funds. So the combination of the changes, reduction in fund balance, and now having those enterprise funds directly pay for their assets, I am feeling confident that we could draw those fund balances down, the 2 of them, fleet to the tune of $1.1 million and facility of $550,000. And as we go through this over the next few weeks, I'd like consideration given to possibly transfer those fund balances over to help offset the general fund shortfall. So that will be a discussion ongoing, like during our 2-on-2s. As part of this, I also did take a look at the liability fund, Currently, those balances are significantly higher as far as the percentage of fund balance to expenditures. And currently, they're at about $5.1 million. However, with what we're facing potentially with some unemployment here, looking at the library and deciding on what council does going forward, we've got the unemployment and associated expenditures. We felt at this time that it may not be prudent to look at drawing down that fund balance right now. If we can kind of see, like over the course of the next 6 months, how things turn out, we may come back and have a different recommendation to you. But right now, I would really kind of like hold off on the liability fund. Any questions about those?
Thank you,
Your
Carol.
Honor.
Alderman Waldron.
Carol or JD, help me understand a little bit about that transfer from the enterprise funds to purchase vehicles. I may be showing my age here, but my knowledge was that the utilities always, everybody always bought their own vehicles. They put into the fleet replacement fund. When it came time to replace a vehicle, those enterprise funds had funded to replace those vehicles. What is changed now that you're saying that you're going to purchase them from the utilities? Haven't they already been paying for them?
Yes. You are absolutely 100% right. What we are recommending is that in hard times, you end up and make some kind of bold moves. And because those enterprise funds do have very healthy fund balances, and we're needing funds in other areas, and we feel that ongoing that would be a good plan to take, that purchases should come directly out of the enterprise funds. We would like the excess funds that they have already paid into the fund potentially to be transferred over to other areas to help balance the shortfall.
I understand what you're saying. So basically you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I'm not sure, based on my experience in the past, that that's legal, that enterprise water and sewer funds stay with water and sewer. I've never experienced a case where you could siphon off water and sewer funds to be used for another source. I know that's probably, I'm not an attorney or a lawyer, but that is the case of what we've experienced in the past. And this would certainly be a break in what we have normally done.
I think Alderman Potter had a comment too.
Just like to reiterate that, I'd like to know what the methodology was here to decide to do this.
So this, I'll let Carol explain to it in detail. The one thing that I understand as part of this recommendation, Alderman Waldron, is that right now the fleet fund carries for an entire 12-month period, they carry all the expenses that they expend for utilities on the operations side of the budget. And what this proposal does is puts them similar to our outsourced customers, like the work that we do for the Arsenal and for Silvis, all our internal or all our in-source customers. We would put the utilities on cash and no longer carry them for a year, and have that so that fund balance doesn't have to absorb all their operational expenses for that entire 12 months. They'd pay month to month, just like all those other customers do. The second part of it, I'll have to have Carol explain to you what she's talking about, the actual asset reserves, because she walked me through it the other day after her conversation and her work with Sarah.
Before we move on to that explanation, Carol, can you explain to me, you had previously mentioned that you thought there may be some defaults in utility billing. Is that calculated into our utility funds before we go buying equipment with it or giving it away? That's where that money would come from, wouldn't it, if there was a default?
Yes. And when we look at all the fund balances at some point all together, it will show those, like some bad debt potentially that we may be absorbing, but there still is adequate funds in those reserves. And then regarding the assets, when I walked it through with Sarah, the total fleet asset size is $17.5 million, and approximately 3.5 million of those are enterprise fund assets. And the entire amount out of that $1.1 million that we're looking at fleet, it's just slightly over $450,000 that would be going, that had been money that had been previously put in that fund for enterprise funds.
So basically, Your Honor, this is Alderman Waldron. So basically, cut to the chase, you're taking money from utilities to help out other funds.
Yes. I mean,
I cannot agree with that, and I do not believe that's legal.
So would it be, I'm just trying to understand it too, Alderman Waldron. Is it like a loan that we would pay back, that the other entities would pay back? Like, say if we put it into the park system, would they pay it back, or would it be just forever?
I mean, that could be council's decision. If they want the general fund, when times get better, to pay it back, or the fleet fund, we could certainly do that as well. We could set it up as a loan.
Is this being motivated by the idea that we have excessive money in those enterprise funds, or I'm just trying to follow it too. Maybe it'll all become clear. Alderman Schoonmaker, I think you had a question?
Yeah, I agree with Alderman Waldron. And if we make it a loan, what's the source of repayment? There's no, there's no recovery here that repays that. If we have excess funds in there from certain enterprise funds, maybe those enterprise funds don't need to continue making their payments going forward, and let it draw down so we can reduce what they're transferring. I see Alderman Waldron nodding his head in agreement. So, if fire has excess funds that we think they're excess, then we don't transfer. Then the money that we would be funding into that can be used for other things.
Oh, I see.
I don't think we can draw out of it.
Alderman Went?
So I do think I like the idea of what we're trying to get to, where the enterprise funds, if it is a vehicle that they use 100% of the time, that they should purchase it, and it should be maintenance and all that stuff should all be calculated and charged back, and those sorts of things. I'm all in favor of this. I know that when we kind of talked about this idea, I had some concerns about, well, they had put $300,000 into this, and they're buying something next year that's $280,000. That just didn't feel right to me. So do we know what the total amount is that the enterprise funds, I think you may have just said it, but is that stuff like imminent, like they're supposed to be buying it next year or the year after, or?
I'd have to take a look at the schedule. I think there is one piece of equipment, but it's out of the current year, and we were going to run that through as budgeted. But it would be $450,000, and we could certainly set it up if we're making the transfer over now to the general fund. We could set it up like a RAN back to either the enterprise funds, break the 450 up to the appropriate enterprise funds, and then ongoing that they would have money there available for their replacements. And that might be a better way to do it. I was hoping to have that conversation later when we go through the enterprise funds, but you all have very valid points.
Okay, well, maybe let's Alderman Went, what would you think about maybe leaving this topic until we have a more consolidated communication about what the plan is and what our options are, and clarification on what is appropriate from a legal perspective? Alderman Potter, did you have a quick comment before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to continue to renew the idea that I know for a fact that when our public works director was in fleet services, we reduced, for instance, a backhoe end loader at one point in time because utilities used to keep it, and the street section had their own, and we reduced the number of items that we have. But the things that are used in the utilities department have generally been charged to them, and that's where the money should come from.
And if there's excess monies, then that means that we should be reducing rates or not raising rates for a number of years, not robbing those funds to pay for other vehicles.
So I appreciate the feedback, and I think this is good. So and one of the things that I'll do, I'll take all that back. We have very accurate records. We know exactly which asset's been paid for by which division and which, whether it was a fee or general fund. And one of the things I'll leave you with is we'll go back and revisit that. And yeah, if we need to, take that back and come back, it sounds like that's probably not something that you want to look at the time. But if there's some interest when we have our 2-and-2 meetings in having them go ahead and pay cash for their operational expenses so we can overcome that, be in their savings account for a year, maybe that part of it is something we could bring forward and capture a little bit of that and just, instead of fleet carrying all their expenses for 12 months before they start to charge that back.
Or maybe we don't pay into it if there's an excess amount of funds, the other entities, but I'm not quite clear on it, so I want to learn more about it too. So count me in on one of the 2-on-2s at least. But Carol, you had mentioned in passing that there was a $450,000 piece of equipment we were going to go ahead and purchase. What was that? I caught just a bit.
Yeah, the 450,000 is what's in. I believe that's what Sarah and I had worked through, that's roughly the balance that was in that account for the enterprise funds.
Okay. Would you say there was some vehicle?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I talked over you. Did you mention that there was a vehicle that we were going to go ahead and purchase?
Yes.
What was
let me see. I think everything is, you know what, now I don't have that sheet with me.
Your Honor, this is Sarah. I can answer that.
Okay.
It's going to be for the jetter vac. It was approved in 2019, and we issued the PO, but it won't be paid for until we receive it, and they're not anticipating starting the build on that piece of equipment until July of this year. And then there was also the IBAC camera van that is still having the fueling, and it's still waiting for the software and everything to be programmed. So we haven't taken delivery of that either, but both of those pieces of equipment are going to be for the sewer maintenance division.
If they haven't started manufacturing, is it possible to get a delay on that?
I can check on that. I don't know 100% because the PO was issued. So I do know that production has not started yet.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For explaining that part.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, JD, back to you.
Okay, so going up to the next column then when we talk about parks. In the communication I had with you, the park board is going to meet on Thursday, and I've had conversations ongoing with the park board president and then with the park rec director. And so their projected lost revenues, there's the combination of a couple things that calculate into that projection of $644,344 in lost revenues. There's an assumption in there, and we'll talk about it when the park board looks at the information from the director on Thursday. They're going to look at scenarios where the community opens back up for congregation and assembly and activities on June 1st, on July 1st, on August 1st. And so this assumption here assumes the lost revenues of not opening the pool at all for the season, not having any activities in parks until August 1st. And so that, like I say, this is just an assumption so we could get a number in here for the conversation this evening. And then the total projected cuts that have gone through in their budget for the operational side and different capital projects, $1,622,023. And then what I want to do is take you down to the bottom there. So the excess or the difference between the shortfall in revenues and the cuts that will be illustrated with that 8/1 anticipated date of restarting programs is $977,679. And what they're going to do, and I support this recommendation, is net of the captain's table. The captain's table is still going on. That's a capital project that's in there, and they'll still move forward. But their funds in their budget for the pickleball courts and the funds in their budget for the Prospect Park Pavilion improvements, for the upgrades and painting, for the Pond Road and the work that they were going to do in Riverside Cemetery, for the Karstens Park playground equipment, all that, all those different capital projects. They had some sidewalk work around the mausoleum. that totals out $567,450. And I don't think quite at this very moment, the park board or anybody is ready to decide whether some of those are going to move forward yet this year, or whether they're going to recommend postponing or delaying those for next year. And so depending on what the park board action is, I would recommend that they just keep those funds there, earmarked for those capital projects, and that the request that we ask for under that 8-1 scenario, if they determine that it's probably going to be the 1st of August before they do move forward, then we would get $410,229 that we would ask to be transferred back to the general fund. The next line down, you know, and I think we kind of talked about it. Brian had projected some shortfalls in revenues and fee, or next column over, I should say, for the library. Brian had anticipated they'd have some shortfalls in fees and for services and different things with the different stay-at-home order and the governor's order. They made some operational cuts prior to the work that they did today of $69,860, and so with the reduction of that $414,825, then their bottom line shortfall in their budget will be $438,919. And as Brian touched on a little bit, they're working on meeting with regularity, and they're going to come up with an operational strategy so they can have some sustainability as they work on a reopening plan to kind of once this order has behind us and people feel safe to go out and start congregating and using facilities like that again. The next line, Mayor, I know Carol.
Your Honor.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Alderman Went.
Go ahead.
When it comes to the library, so the reduction in revenues, they had $508,000 in revenues at the library that they don't think that they'll bring in this year.
Yeah, I can't do the math on the fly, but it's $414,825 plus. That's it's about $95,000.
The reduction in the CIP to $39,000, and then they just had shortfalls of just normal revenue streams that are a result of them, especially now if they're not open, that they won't be receiving charges for services and fines.
Okay, so that 508 includes the 414 plus the funds that got pulled out of the offshore account or the Moline Foundation account, and then whatever that remaining few $1,000s is late fees and that. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Yep. All right. Sorry if I was going past that too quick. So then going over to the MFT, as Carol said, her initial review through this looked at it. They had had a different percentage figure in there on what they think the reduction is in MFT. That $875,000, though, I don't want to skip over that or ignore it, but we have some obligations to MFT, but Carol's going to be working. We have some unrestricted reserves in MFT that aren't obligated for this year, and Carol's going to get us honed in, and before we have our next round of meetings, she'll be able to give us that number. Additionally, I know the mayor has submitted some stuff to Kay, and I've been in some communications, I think, going back and forth, and it looks like there could be some CDBG funds available for maybe some MFT type projects in some of the census tract areas, it looks like, in some of our low to mod districts and that. And so I think hopefully we'll get an opportunity to maybe bring some of those here and talk about whether some of those could offset some of that shortfall as well and keep those projects moving forward. So so we'll stay tuned into that and get you closer to what that number is probably going to hone into. The next one on CIP we talked about is...
Sorry, Alderman Went?
I'm sorry.
I'm not paying attention.
So with the 875 as RANs, what is that coming? Is that coming out of enterprise funds?
So if we do that, I'm saying if we get towards the end of the season and we have to do something to offset commitments to that, I would suggest a RAN from one of the utility funds or.
But then aren't we just incurring debt? I mean, that's not actually any cost savings. We're just moving money around and kind of, as Alderman Waldron robbing Peter to pay Paul and giving him an IOU. That doesn't offset our revenue deficit for this year, right?
No, it wouldn't.
Yep. And part of the reason, I guess, that we set it up that way was because last week we felt that we had heard I think it was unanimous directive from the council that you wanted all the CIP projects to move forward. So as a part of that, in order to make those projects move forward, even though we're having a shortfall of revenue, we're trying to come up with alternative ways to pay for those projects. I actually believe
but we weren't told that we had a shortfall in that CIP fund to pay for those, because the CIP, like on the projects we just talked about, the CIP was, like 10% of the project, and everything else was for enterprise funds, water or WPC. I guess if we're in a situation where we don't have those CIP for stuff that we've already allocated for, I think that's maybe a spreadsheet we need to see so that we understand that. Because from what you're saying, it sounds like we've already spent money that we don't have, and that's something that we need to know.
So,
and again, this is under the $10 million scenario. When you saw it last week under the 5.8, it was about $1 million, 967,000 short, I believe the difference was.
correct.
And so it was a more manageable number.
And when we talked about it last week, I had suggested that you could do RANs or you could do some other strategies if all those projects came in. And I know that's why I wanted all of you to talk about all 4 of those projects that had been bid but not yet awarded at the same time, because we know with Carol's projections there are going to be shortfalls in those different funds. We just we don't know yet to what level, and you can see as she ran it through on a $10 million shortfall scenario and applied those different assumptions out to a larger number, then it grows exponentially up to that 1.5 million there. Well, and after you took the sidewalks out, that's the $230,000 figure down there underneath that takes the sidewalks out. But Alderman Went, this is why I brought all those last week, to make sure that you guys understood that was coming forward. Let me go back and speak to the MFT project.
But JD, you didn't say last week that we didn't have the funds for it.
Yes, I did. I pointed that out clearly because I wanted to make sure that you folks knew when I brought that forward that you understood that we're going to spend funds that we don't forecast that will be coming in that category, in the utility tax and in the home rule sales tax.
Alderman Potter?
With regard specifically to the MFT, we have MFT projects out there, that's what we're saying, and we may have obligations on MFT projects, and we may have not sufficient funds. So the anticipation note, the revenue anticipation note, is purely to take care of those obligations that have already been set forth. We're not talking about trying to match, the reduction in future, just to get us through what's here for now.
No, and what I would say is those different projects that, like I would talk to Joe immediately here after tonight, if there's maybe an interest in scaling something back. I think some of those overlay projects, I think there were 3 different stages of them, and maybe we'd see where they were planning on starting, look at the price point on the different ones, and I could bring it back to you to consider scaling that back or something like that. I mean, I don't think that is too far down the road, but
GD, if you're going to bring those back to us, would you also bring the engineering background on if those are delayed, if it's going to incur additional costs with additional construction requirements? That's a concern that I have. If we delay those, it won't just be a charge in next year, it'll be a charge plus additional engineering costs to recover from the degradation. Alderman Waldron?
JD or Carol, could you remind me, we have some debt dropping off. Can you remind us what year that debt starts dropping off and the amount out of the CIP?
Yeah, we've got, it's pretty good drop off all the way through. Hold on here.
When does the drop off start?
20
I know it's
2023 is
2023.
Yeah, I think so, but Carol, I'd have to, I don't have that one memorized. But I know there's,
Nope. We've got it in our chart. Let's see here. For CIP, I'm sorry, if you can bear with me here, I just need to look at categories. A lot of pages. Okay. Our regular CIP debt, principal and interest. We've got principal and interest on our normal debt service, aside from TIF, water, and storm, going out till 2030. But we've got big chunks. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got at least almost $12 million dropping off in the next 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, let's
Okay.
move forward, please.
okay, so yeah, so I guess I touched a little bit on that CIP, but in her scenario, the $10 million, then you can see that it's grown from $967,000 in the anticipated shortfall in the home rule sales tax and then utility tax up to that $1,582,000. Taking out the sidewalk projects, and that contract for this year brings that back to the $1,352,000. And again, we would talk about whether you want to use revenue anticipation notes, and that now that all the projects are bid and awarded, we can tell you exactly as bid and with our fund balance, kind of where we think that where that may be, you know, if there are some excess funds, like we know that one alley project came in around $58,000 under budget, and assuming that we have funds like that available. But I will caution you, I mean, we never have a project come in at the end of the year where we don't have change orders at some point or another. So we will, that number will move before the year's out. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to Carol, and she'll talk a little bit about this, and then we'll go in through some of the more line item detail and kind of tell you what some of those $1.922 million cuts involve.
Alderman Parker?
Thank you. JD?
Yeah.
Going back to the CIP projects, the one for 19th Avenue, I see it's on the council agenda tonight. Do we have funds available for this?
So this is what we talked about last week, is that no, we anticipate with the $5.8 million scenario that we're going to be about $962,000 to $967,000 short in home rule sales tax and utility taxes that apply to CIP projects. And in this scenario that we were asked to look at here with the $10 million, then that grows up to that $1.582 million. But again, not moving forward with the sidewalks, then that takes $230,000 that was plugged into the budget and takes it from that, brings it down to $1,352,000.
So, Judy, refresh my memory, but isn't the utility tax restricted to only be CIP? It's not like it goes into some general, is it?
It's the home rule sales tax is unrestricted by ordinance. The utility tax is
what I'm
directed by
referring to.
ordinance in certain percentages.
I'll tell you what the percentages are. 80% has to be spent in CIP, 20% can be spent in general fund. The 20% in general fund was not included in our CIP budget. It was already pulled off.
Okay.
So I don't, unless it's a specific reduction in utility tax, which my recollection of those projects was that it was using utility tax for the CIP portion that was away from the storm sewer and water supply. But my recollection may be mistaken in that spreadsheet. So I'm trying to catch up with what I was communicated to last week and kind of what my thoughts are now. So
I'd have to ask Keith how if he took that and those, you're saying maybe if his anticipated shortfall pulled 20% anticipated reduced in general and then 80% of it reduced in the CIP, is that what you're saying for the utility tax revenues? I'd have to ask him if that's his projection.
Yeah.
Or maybe if Carol knows.
I know, I mean, that is the formula that he used.
Okay.
And maybe we can better describe it. We're hoping on the 2-on-2s to go through these CIP projects and the potential impact in more detail next week.
All right, Alderman Parker?
So I guess I go back to my question. We're being asked to approve this tonight on the council agenda. Do we have the funds available to pay for it or not?
So, last week, that's what I explained to you. I taking Carol's projections, I project that you're gonna have a shortfall in that fund, according to Carol's projections. And so if we get to the end of the year to close these projects out and that projection hits that target, then as we talked last week, then you're gonna probably be $962,000 to $967,000 short under that anticipated $5.8 million shortfall across all funds. In this $10 million shortfall, you'll be short $1,352,000 in those funds. And so to go ahead and move forward with these projects, as we've been instructed to do, then, and we mentioned it last week, you'd have to use a revenue anticipation note or some other funding source or funding strategy to capture that portion there where you're gonna have this anticipated shortfall.
Maybe, is Joe still on the call? Joe, are you still on?
Yeah, if I could just interject there quickly.
Yeah.
I believe the only amount under, for instance, on the 19th Avenue that's a shortfall would be the $72,458. That's the money that's coming out of CIF. The other monies are water, sewer,
Right.
and stormwater.
I
So
agree.
there's only even though I didn't support it, there's only a small amount, for instance, in the 19th Avenue
It's
project
the
that is
CIP.
part of the shortfall that you're referring
A
to.
CIP, right?
Right.
So a portion of that may be impacted by the shortfall, but my recollection is that it was funded from the CIP through the utility tax. So the only potential reduction would be in the utility tax, unless we're moving something else around. But we don't really have any flexibility with utility tax, so it's not like it's going anywhere.
And home rule sales tax goes into that category also.
I don't think that spreadsheet showed it as home rural sales tax. I think it was specifically utility tax funding these extra projects that were kind of in the mix. But I think we do need to know more about that. And Joe, that's why I want to check in with you. What's the status of these projects? Are they bid and we are just looking to assign it?
Yeah, these projects are bid, and they were brought to you tonight to move forward to award to the contractor.
Okay, can we hold off on that for 2 weeks, or will that be disruptive to the construction schedule?
Well, I mean, absolutely, we could hold off. We do have, there is in our contract a 45-day time frame in which the contractors can pull their bid if they chose to. We don't have to necessarily go out to rebid, but they do have the option to withdraw a bid after 45 days.
How much time do we?
March 24th, so we have time.
How much time? So we have 45 days before we have to award the project from March 31st. Am I getting those numbers right?
We have 45 days before the contractor has the ability or the right to withdraw their contract. So if the low bidder decided to withdraw for whatever reason they chose to, then we would have to go to the next highest bidder or rebid at that time, whatever direction the council would want us to go at that.
There's no requirement in our timeline on when we have to issue the bid after we've opened the bids?
No, there is not. The only thing is, as we get further into construction season, timeframes and things like that, and as our projects align, would be more difficult to navigate, but we could absolutely wait.
All right, thank you. So that may be something the council would want to consider this evening, is putting a hold on those that we just voted on. It would just need to come from someone that supported the vote. Alderman Nguyen?
Well, I think the 19th I would be supportive because we need to get that. We've got a history of waiting, and those projects then wind up bleeding into school starting off, and that's right at the entrance of John Deere. So that one, I think we should move forward. As Alderman Potter said, that's 72,000. We'll figure that on the back end. But the others, yeah, I mean, they won't be back on until they get on they're not going to be approved until they get onto the council agenda anyway. So hopefully between now and then we'll be able to figure this out.
Oh, okay. I didn't really think about that. We got one more vote on.
JD, real quick, last week, was this information provided in that 3-page PowerPoint that you guys?
Yeah, this was all in that. This was in that email that I'd sent you that week prior to, and I put that chart in there, and I put that explanation in there about why I wanted to bring all these to you in one group so you could look at them and talk to them, because we're looking at shortfalls in that fund, and I wanted you guys to look at this all in its entirety, and that so you understood the magnitude of what we're talking about here when we move forward on these projects. And
was that part of your presentation, like up on the board as we were going through? And I apologize. I mean, we're doing this.
Yeah, it was.
And
yes, it was.
Was that in that PowerPoint you provided?
Yes, it was. And Carol, and when Carol,
because I don't think I ever got that PowerPoint.
I think that was the one that we didn't get until like 10 minutes before the meeting. Is that correct, Mike? Do you remember the discussion on that? And then if I'm recalling that email that went out, that was the one that you replied back and wanted some clarification on the sales tax that was involved in that. Do you remember that? So
Right. Yeah, I remember doing that. But as far as the presentation at the council meeting, that's the portion I'm trying to jog my memory of, where while we are considering it, that conversation that we didn't have the money available for that out of the CIP.
Well, I would just recommend that we deep dive this, because we're kind of working with some unknowns right now. We need to look back at more information. So if you don't mind, we're going to be okay, because we can't do the final approval for 2 weeks. And so if there's an issue that comes up and we want to handle it differently, we can address it at the next council meeting. Is that fair? All right, JD, moving on.
Yep. I'll move on in 1 second, but I want to circle back to this one thing, and that's why I mentioned it again tonight before we talked about those projects, is because I wanted everybody to know I've made sure that everybody knew going to this many times that if we move forward on these projects, we're expending funds that Carol's model and the different scenario now with 10 million do not project us to have enough to cover these projects.
JD, I think that's what the council's trying to tell you, is that understanding wasn't clear. I appreciate that you communicated it, but I don't think that it was clear to some of the council members. So we'll talk about it further at the 2-on-2s. Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
Can we move on?
Yep.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Carol.
Yep. And unless you have questions, we've kind of talked about the internal service funds and the enterprise funds. Again, I'm going to talk about that in depth during our 2-on-2s. And so it all kind of ties together with pulling some of those internal service funds down. So if it's okay, I think we'll just proceed and just talk about some of the overall cuts that were made, if that's okay. Unless you have questions.
We're good, Carol. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to let JD kind of start walking through these, and then I'll chime in when he needs me.
Okay. So I don't know who's running the mouse. Is that you, Don?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, the next slide, Don.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so these are just proposed cuts across all funds. We've made no adjustments to anything in the budget, but these are the summary of what those cuts and adjustments would be if, as council, we look through these and they decide to take some action on these and that incorporate them into the budget. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Now, the things we have done, the hiring freeze and the moratorium on hiring, that calculates out through the end of the year to be $876,867 for the current open positions. I'm not going to read all these different lines. You guys can look at that unless you want me to go over it. But the overtime then, except we left it in for police and fire and, for only emergencies and public works. The 128,514 is the reduction there. Taking all the seasonal employment out of the budget for the entire year's 863,410. Now that does include, seasonals and parks as well. But go ahead, Don. These are considerations then for recreational services that'll be done as the library closure. comes forward here now. The pool closure that more than likely I anticipate that they'll probably make that decision as a board on Thursday. The assumptions we talked about, canceling recreation programs and events that bring together congregations till 8/1. The attorney cancellations that we anticipate through Green Valley through 8/1. The Citizen Police Academy isn't going forward this year. The next.
Your Honor?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I missed who raised their hand. Was that Alderman Nguyen?
Alderman Nguyen, yeah. JD, back to the slide before, are you saying that the library board is intending to have the library closed longer than what the governor's mandate is for it to be closed?
I'm not sure. The conversations they had today said they're going to meet every week and they're going to talk about their timing to reopen, and the word they used was a soft opening, like maybe they wouldn't open with full people, you know, depending on what kind of restrictions come out, if any restrictions come out on a new order.
Before we go on to the next slide, can I ask about the Green Valley tournament cancellations? Are we canceling those to save money, or are they being canceled by the tournament organizers?
It might be a combination of both. I'll ask Eric to jump in and he can talk about what they've had so far.
Well, I guess, you know, and the library board is able to do what the library board wants to do, but from my standpoint, I think that as soon as the governor allows that to start to be open, that we should find a way to open it. Now, it may need to ramp up and it may not be fully staffed to 100% depending on how that comes down from the governor. But I think that is something from my standpoint we should be as one of our goals.
How do we communicate something like that to the library board? Is that like a council communication direct to their board? Do you want me to, is that the consensus of the council? Alderman Walker? Are there any dissenting thoughts on that idea, opening the library as soon as we're allowed to open it? Alderman Moyer?
You know, I think we have to, but clearly the board's gonna have to be concerned about you know, group activities, right?
Yeah, I feel like it would be more of like a soft opening,
we
but
have liabilities.
I'm expecting them to open it again, and so I don't know if they are misunderstanding by this consideration, JD, that somehow the council is asking them to consider to close the library in an extended time frame. Is that, what are these considerations?
I think having this slide up there can completely be misconstrued that we're making some recommendation to close the library. And the only reason that the library is closed, we had even worked with the idea of curbside delivery on things until the governor's proclamation said that it had to be closed. So I think we need to be very careful on just kind of throwing things on a slide like this. And so I would be in favor of directing the mayor to have some communication with the library board that we'd like to see it open, whether that's full staff or not, to figure out how to do that, or with social distancing or limited number of people in the building at the time. But for us to figure out a way to open as soon as the governor allows us to open up.
Is there a second? Alderman Parker?
I'll second that, but then I have a conversation to it.
Okay, go ahead, Alderman Parker. We have a second by Alderman.
I totally agree, but I want to be sure that JD, with this library closure, are we, we're asking them that, we're not asking, we're telling them they're not going to receive that $414,000 that they were expecting from us. Are they going to be able to open the library without, in the absence of that funding that they were anticipating and budget time last year?
So with Brian on here, I think if you want him to talk about, some of the, some of the considerations that he's going to share with his library board, he could probably do that. But I know just overhearing some of the conversations that, for them to overcome their budget shortfalls, you saw it actually is closer to $508,000 that they anticipate. He talked about quite a few different things, and it may require when they open to have limited hours similar to what their old summer hours were, and that at different times when they used to do different hours in the summer and that. But he could probably talk in more detail if you want to drill down into that.
Brian?
Yes, yes, thank you. There's no doubt in my mind that the library board is on the same page as what I'm hearing from the council right now. I think they have the same desires as to be able to open, as quickly as we can after COVID, as long as conditions are safe in the library.
Thank you, Brian. Well, I think that it would be fine then for the council to concur, just so there's not any misunderstanding. Is there anyone else that wants to make a comment before we have a vote? Alderman Waldron?
Brian, the library could go to reduced hours. Couldn't, conversely, it also go to reduced staff? Just do its core essential items and keep their normal hours? As an example, obviously getting books in and out, books out, but do we need to do all the functions of the library? Can it be an either or?
To be honest with you, that's something that we're working on right now. As we're working on a plan, and this is what we'll be doing in our weekly meetings, is figuring out a plan so that we can do that, offer as many services as we can. But it could certainly be a combination of maybe a lesser staff to begin with, and yes, certainly just those core services of materials and information.
Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
Are there any other comments before we take a vote? All those in favor, please communicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? That motion carries. And just for clarification, it will just be just kind of a communication of what the sentiment was. We do not have the authority to direct the library board on what they do in this situation. Thank you, JD. We can go on to the next slide now. Thank you.
Okay, so some of the things, if like I say, I could read down through all these, and that if we take out only just leave in the emergency overtime for police and fire, some of the proactive non-emergency overtime that they use are for like impact and gun and drug crime investigations, different things that they do with Crime Stoppers and different events that they have. And if we only use overtime, in that, and some of that scale back for emergency services, then some of these other proactive things that they do, would cease to take place. And
Like, so any kind of paper.
I think we have somebody has.
Blind or grass.
Who is that? I think we have someone that isn't muted. Alderman Berg, you got it. Okay.
Some of the other things, that we're not doing some of those health and home inspections right now, nuisance violation inspections, and that. So we've got some reduced revenues that are reflected in the budget on some of that stuff. The one of the projected cuts takes and doesn't put money into reserves for the station alerting system this year for airbags and defibrillators and that on our annual contribution to the equipment replacement fund.
Alderman Potter?
Is a reduced enforcement of ordinance due to the fact that there's no one assisting our neighborhood improvement officers? Is that what it is?
That's true. We took the seasonal out of that budget.
Got it.
Okay.
I'll make sure.
Then, one of the proposals is to not buy that camera and the new vehicle extraction equipment and that for the fire department. Delay the purchase of some of their safety gear, and then the washer that they were going to purchase for I forget one of the stations. They were going to buy another washer and that for the carcinogen type cleaning. So you can jump to the next one if you would, Don. Some of the maintenance services and that could be part of these considerations here, and some of these cuts would be, a different strategy for street sweeping, take a different look at leaf vacuuming, possibility of doing something different with snow removal, and that, maybe modify that service, less frequent mowing, specifically in the right-of-ways and some of the open areas, the parking lot striping, and that, reduce that, or increase the frequency, traffic signal and street light repairs. Basically we'd be flashing reds probably on evenings and weekends. We might, not use overtime to come in and do that. We could save money doing that and just, put up signage and that, and then do the signal restoration and that on without overtime. So, and then it just talks about, some of the things that'll be outcome of that. Obviously, the appearance in that is the grass is a little taller and things like that. It's not going to look the same as people are typically used to. So,
Alderman Berg? You're still on mute, Alderman Berg.
Thank you, Mayor. JD, can you tell me what are they doing on the weekends and who's coming in on the weekends for something? I didn't hear that.
a lot of times when you have a traffic signal go out or something like that, I imagine you've probably seen them on the four-way flash, and they'd have different things, and the police officers have a limited ability to do anything with those to get them back in timing, so we have to call in our traffic signal operations specialist. And so, some of the considerations we could do by eliminating that overtime would just be leave them on flashing red and only fix them on straight time hours.
JD?
Okay, so, Mayor, can I ask another question?
Go ahead, Alderman Berg.
Your revised street sweeping, revised leaf vacuuming, and revised snow removal, what are you talking about as far as what are we going to provide to our constituents? What are they not going to get then?
Well, some of the different things that we'll be able to talk to you about, and that, and different examples is, that we could just suspend street sweeping and, not do that this year. I realize it has the optics of being, somewhat of an aesthetic. I mean, there is a impact on our storm sewer system, and that when we don't do street sweeping, but the optics of it, appear to be, the aesthetic part of it, just taking debris off of the pavement and that. And so if that's something that you wanted to look at suspending the leaf vacuum program. I know Rod gave that presentation last year about several different ways that we can, manage the leaf collection and still maintain a burn ban. And so we can talk about some of the different ways to do that and what the different cost savings would be by using different strategies there. And then, we could take a look at snow removal and doing programs that are similar to some of our neighbors, where maybe, I don't know, the one that comes to mind is Davenport. I know they have a different snowfall accumulation total before they go into residential areas and stuff, and so we can take a look at some of those kind of things.
JD, I know that you're just kind of sharing some things that we'll be talking about further, but the two that make me anxious are the deferred facilities maintenance and the ash tree project reduced. I'm concerned about the deferred facilities maintenance because I don't want our assets to be degraded or be at any risk of having more costs later to bring them up to standard. And then the ash tree, do we have any concern that our ash trees are in a situation where they could fall and injure someone? Or is it just a proactive maintenance to keep it from expanding, or what is that?
So I think what some of staff is going to talk to the park board about on Thursday is if they want to take a look and probably decide which ones may be a danger, to falling or whatever, and that depending on how far that emerald ash borer action has progressed, and maybe scale back that $80,000 I think they put in there this year and just do the ones that are diseased and imminent for danger. So I think that's what the conversation is probably going to gravitate towards.
And when the staff is recommending the deferred facilities maintenance, can you give me a little bit of parameters of what that discussion's about?
No, I think what you're seeing is that if we are scaling back on some of our maintenance services and that, and we're not going to be mowing around some of these facilities and doing some of that, then like we talked about, some of the things that they may consider is closing the restrooms in all the parks, the 40 different restrooms, and that they may just not open those this year. I know that's one of the things they're going to talk about on Thursday, and then obviously that the maintenance would be deferred on those different buildings probably as well, because we wouldn't have a.
Your Honor.
Yep, go ahead.
There again.
So.
Some of the things that we've pushed out are going to be not necessarily the exterior aesthetics. I know that there's a very large project for police that was delayed this year for $105,000 for carpeting on the first and second floor. So it was going to be mostly those types of projects that are not going to be detrimental as far as to the structure itself. It's going to be more the appearance, and most of that's going to be on the interior. So we do still have projects that are going to be like roofing and windows that are still built in there, things that we probably won't be able to delay just because we don't want it to be a detriment to the structure. So that was considered when we were pushing things back and rearranging.
You know, I'm sorry to divert from this conversation, but I do want to understand something that I had heard that one of our roofs had a leak. Does that come out of a separate budget because there's the enterprise fund for building maintenance, or does that come out of that individual building ownership of the department budget?
Could you tell me which building it was?
The library.
Okay, so the library is in our facilities management plan, so that's one of the ones we're talking about. That roof, I told them today it's probably 5 windstorms away from a serious event with the roof. And so we've been, working, Sarah and I have been working for the last 3 years to build reserves in that fund because we know that roof is not going to it's not going to have a useful life much longer. So we've got money in reserves to move that project forward.
So just clarification, that is not impacted by the 414,000. That maintenance of that roof is taken from a different budget.
It's
Is
taken
that
from
correct?
that facilities management budget
Facilities
that we're going to
management
take
budget.
that money out of. That
And it's also still in the budget for this year from what they're proposing.
Okay, and so the library had previously invested in that roof replacement through that funding mechanism, and that'll be addressed in a different way.
Yeah, technically Fleet did.
Yes, and we'll actually be coming.
That's the fund that we built, it's Fleet reserves when we spent them down, but yeah, technically it was for that roof.
Perfect, thank you. I just want to make sure that that roof was safe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and then, and so then some of the other considerations that are included in this list is that we're not doing any downtown parking enforcement. That's got an impact on the revenues. Carol can speak to some of these other ones because she talked about that we had a budget line item in there, I think of around $10,000 to have property tax appeal defenses and that, and she's gonna recommend reducing that down now because we don't have the full amount necessary in there. The reduction of the form-based code, she put that on here, but if you remember right, I told you last week that anything that you reduce on the expenditure side of that, I'm going to recommend the correlating reduction on the revenue side because that came out of tourism, and so that's just a push. The facade improvement program, I know that there's been a reduction of funds recommended to lower that down. I can't remember exactly how much is earmarked in there. And then we've taken the professional development out of the budget in pretty much mostly across all areas except left some in police and fire there, and that'll just impact some of the certifications and training and that for the different staff members. So, Don, can you switch to the next one? So as instructed, there's no change to CIP plans with the exception of the sidewalk infill, and you'll see we brought that contract to you with Dirk's recommendation on how to end that this evening on the council agenda. That the revenue shortfalls and the CIP from your home rule sales tax and your utility tax, we offered you up the one option to do that with revenue anticipation notes from utilities if you get to the end of the year and don't have the money for that.
I think, Alderman Schoonmaker.
I just want to, we keep tossing around revenue anticipation notes. That makes me very nauseous. Basically, you're spending next year's money. You're borrowing against next year and spending next year's money. That's unfortunately, how our county is forced to operate often. And that just creates a bigger hole. I am very nervous every time I hear that. And I want to make sure that people are aware that probably is a last-ditch effort, not something that we want to be looking at.
Alderman Witt.
I agree. I mean, I think that, the idea that I think we asked staff to do was to go through this without incurring additional debt, and a RAN is just a form of that. Again, it's just borrowing money against ourselves. Now, if we get down to the bare knuckle bottom and there's nothing else that we can do, that's, again, as we went through this phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, that's a phase further down the road that we may have to look at if we can't find it another way. But this is just again kicking the can down the road.
So just for clarification, Ms. Schoonmaker, I haven't heard any discussion of revenue anticipation notes other than these CIP projects. Have you? Has there been any mention in any other category?
No, it's just been brought up several times tonight. It makes me very concerned.
Yeah, I think that we're going to get clarification in the 2-on-2s with that. I think that the council has a consensus there that isn't a good option and just wants to understand better what that funding looks like. So thank you.
Okay, so the next ones we already covered on that last slide, just the details of that, and then the deferred vehicle.
Alderman Waldron? Yes.
I know we're going to talk about this Thursday, JD, but on your third bullet point under park projects, wouldn't Riverside Cemetery Road and repair and replacement fall into the same category as the capital improvement projects we're talking about with council and the CIP? If we would delay these for a year, they're going to cost more money next year. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I thought probably the park board would talk about all these, and the only one that I would maybe wonder about is that playground equipment. Depending on when you open back your playgrounds or whatever, and depending on we typically self-perform on those to do those installations. So depending on what we have available for seasonal help and whatever, and depending on the grass mowing, I might ask you to consider holding off on that Karsten's playground equipment installation, because you may not have the staff to perform to install that.
Well, and I agree with that too. I can't remember exactly, but is there even a playground equipment in Karsten's now?
I'd let Rod jump in and talk about what their plans are. I know, but I don't know to what magnitude they're planning on expanding it or whatever.
Yes, there is playground equipment that exists there.
It's pretty minimal though, isn't it, Rod?
It is pretty minimal.
Okay, thank you guys.
And then the deferred vehicle replacements, I know we talked about this last week, that there was a corresponding reduction in chargebacks to all the customers for the amount of vehicle replacements that were deferred. And then you can see that, Carol's recommendation was to spend down those reserves to a different fund level. So the next slide, Don. So anyway, just some of these considerations then would obviously give us slower response times and reduce our customer service. The streamlined service delivery, we can implement, some of these different things. Interactive voice response is one of the things we talked about for utility bill payments. Cash machines is something I know that we've got a team of people working on those, and I expect we can probably talk to you a little bit more about it on the 2-on-2 meetings, but for sure by the 5th of May, I think Don and his team and different people looking at these cash stations or these payment stations, and that'll be able to come talk to you some more about some of those details. And then we already went over, Carol kind of touched on the reduction to the fund balances for those internal service funds. Okay. So as Margaret touched on a little bit earlier, Your Honor, that later tonight we're going to ask you for an executive session to talk a little bit more then about how to capture that $1.7 million gap.
Thank you. Is that it for our informational?
Yes.
Are there any questions before JD? We close out of this part of it? So I want to just clarify my understanding is that this is just an informational, you haven't asked for the council to approve anything this evening, and we're going to learn more in the 2-on-2s, just kind of stage the 2-on-2s. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone's effort in preparing that. That's it for the informational. We now have public comment, and so I'm going to follow through with what I had proposed in reading some of the public comment, and then we'll read some more at the end of the council agenda. The first item, and I'm assuming all these are under 3 minutes, so forgive me if they're longer than that, or you can tell me to stop talking. The first one is from Judith Capel. Dear Mayor and our aldermen, the library should be open and functioning at this time. While obviously their physical doors must remain closed during our stay-at-home order, staff can work remotely to provide services we need as a community during this challenging time. Libraries are the providers of many resources for families and individual citizens, there to support our needs when we are at our most vulnerable. Children and parents who need support during e-learning can call on the library for research, digital materials, homework help, and more. Those still struggling to gain internet access could use the library's Wi-Fi from the parking lot. Kids and young adults can still receive story time, story recommendations, and library activities via the internet. Patrons can have access to many digital books, audio resources, and media that will contribute to them maintaining their mental health while we all learn to live with the stress of COVID-19. Libraries around the world are coming up with smart, responsible, and innovative ways to provide relevant services to their communities during this time of global crisis. We need libraries to be there for us during this time and as we make our way out of it. As people have lost jobs and had economic hurts, one of the first places they will go are their public institutions of support like the library. Give Moline Library an opportunity to shine in this way. Do not continue down this devastating path. Our community's access to information, knowledge, communication, and connection is dependent on our strong library. It could and should be a beacon of hope and steadiness we can rely on as we all do our best to weather the storm. We should be positioning our library to the forefront of our effort to cope and support it as we move out of this situation. Why is Moline doing this drastic measure and no other towns in the Quad Cities are doing it? How are these towns able to continue to support their important public institutions, but you are unwilling to do so? Additionally, you do not seem to be paving the way for the library's future success. You have made no promises to return staff. As a family who relies on the library in many ways and is advocating for full restoration of funds and the council's commitment to support the library, I am desperate to make you understand the short-sightedness of your actions. It is our job as concerned citizens to come to you and tell you what we value in our community. It is your job to take our comments seriously and not to just make a decision without us and ignore our pleas. Stand by the library. Do not continue this bad path you have taken. Thank you for the time. Thank you, Judith. The next comment is from Thomas Swinburne. Thank you for accepting public questions and comments. Will the council and mayor be considering temporary pay reductions for themselves along with other possible staff cuts? Thank you, Tom Swinburne. Thank you, Tom, for your comment. The next item is from James Patrick Schmidt. Good evening. The Moline Public Library is a shining example of how this city can work for the residents. It allows me to keep up on my reading habit without going over budget. It is an engaging play and learning environment that my children beg me to visit each week. And more importantly, it provides free services and a safe place to meet for all citizens, but especially the most vulnerable among us. I was disheartened to hear at last week's meeting as the council worked to aggressively reduce the city's commitment to supporting the library. I understand that some budget lines will need to be revisited as we face the challenges of COVID-19, but I feel the conversation of revoking significant contributions and also lowering the levy in the future is going too far. I am glad that the council was reaching out to the library board to ensure they have an opportunity to become engaged in this process, and I hope that this council will see fit to hear concerns from that board and the community about the importance of fully funding the library, especially given how critical it is to promoting the welfare of our citizens, both now, through online services, and after this crisis has passed. Thank you, James Patrick Smith, 1828 36th Street, Moline. Thank you, James. The next comment is from Anna Turnicliffe. As you may know, it's National Library Week, an annual celebration of the contributions of libraries and library, and a time to promote library use across the nation. Moline has a very funny way of celebrating. Today, I came across a photo essay that told me the city was closing its library and laying off all of its employees. I'm having difficulty finding any more details reported about this event. What led to it? Whether Moline has plans to support any library services in the future or not. But regardless of the answers to those questions, the action of cutting off library services completely when Moliners, especially students, are stuck and home in need of its online support is shockingly short-sighted, maybe even cruel. As a child in the Quad Cities, I benefited from a region that supported library services in a big way. Every city had a robust library with large circulation, and all the collections were connected, making it easy for me to become an avid reader and explore my interests. Library events at the Moline Public Library introduced me to new music, new ideas, and new friends. I use libraries to receive math tutoring, log volunteer hours, and just hang out in a safe, supportive environment. It was a lifeline that allowed me to access more knowledge than my family could have afforded me. And I know so many people who had the same story. The thought that children in Moline won't be able to access this resource when this crisis is over and will not have it throughout just breaks my heart. The theme of National Library Week this year is Find the Library at Your Place, Find Your Place at the Library. By cutting your library programs, a basic service in most American cities, you're making sure that the people of Moline cannot find the library, much less find their place there. Please consider the long-term consequences this will have for the people of Moline. Sincerely, Anna Turnicliffe, MLIS. Thank you, Anna. This statement is from Sangeetha Rayapati. To Mayor Acree and the members of Moline City Council, I speak to you today as a concerned citizen because your recent discussions regarding the library's future and your own budgeting desires gave me pause. I have lived in Moline for 17 years and have been witness to the myriad changes in our town, including the establishment of a fabulous new library that is a jewel in the crown of public services Moline offers. My family has personally benefited from the variety of programming available, the helpful staff, the access to computers and documents it provides. This access is crucial to our population who in the coming months will need digital access in order to find jobs, print resumes, file taxes, and manage the impact of our economic downturn in their lives. Not only that, but our children will need access to the resources provided during the summer as the work of the school district ends in May. Without these crucial resources, in whatever form possible, you will not be meeting the needs of our diverse and engaged citizens. I am not a stranger to difficult budget decisions. I have lived through them at my place of employment, been trained in them, and had to take votes like you regarding budgets through my work on the Moline Coal Valley School Board. Because of that experience, I understand the intricacies of relationships between governing bodies, their staff, and their funding. I know it is not an easy task to find the funds needed to keep going in a crisis. The state budget impasse of 2017 taught me that. I also know, however, that a city is not merely made up of streets and businesses, and you are not solely in charge of construction and ordinances or pensions and payroll. You are here to serve the people of Moline and make sure our community is well positioned to be the best it can be, even in tough times. I encourage you to not take an adversarial stance with the library board in coming to conclusions about what level of support the city can or should maintain during this economic downturn. I urge you to consider the needs of the citizens and, as Alderman Wentz stated last week, to find out what the core functions of the library are. Ask them for multiple budget scenarios. Talk to us in the school district about the impact the library has on the children of this community. We have a committee created at your request for these kinds of joint conversations. Failure to do so will reveal myopic or misplaced priorities and cause the public to question the sincerity of your budget reduction requests. After all, Mayor Acree, at one of your coffee chats you invited me to during our 2017 campaigns, you replied to an attendee regarding the library will be paying for that forever. Respectfully submitted, Sangeetha Rayapati, 5th Ward resident. And I did reach out to Sangeetha. I had an opportunity to review these because it hadn't really occurred to me that there would be an opportunity to partner with the school district on this situation. And so I sent her an email, and I hadn't gotten a response yet by the meeting, but I'll let you know if there is an opportunity there for the library board and the school board to work together. Those are my selections for right now. If there's no further business in the committee of the whole, we're going to close out of the committee and we're going to go into the council agenda. There will be no invocation this evening, but we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Alderman Williams,
Present.
Parker,
Present.
Went,
Present.
Potter,
Present.
Moyer,
Present.
Schoonmaker,
Present.
Waldron, Berg.
I think you're on mute, Alderman Berg.
Present.
Your Honor, I request approval of Committee of the Whole and Council meeting minutes of April 14th, 2020, and appointments made during Committee of the Whole on April 21st, 2020. Second reading ordinances. Council Bill 3012-2020, an ordinance amending Chapter 22, Offenses Miscellaneous of the Moline Code of Ordinances, Article 1, by enacting one new Division 7 entitled Registration of Certain Offenders. Council Bill 4006-2020, a special ordinance granting a temporary modification to Section 28-3200A and Section 35-4218 of the Moline Code of Ordinances to permanently waive the installation of sidewalks for property located along 36th Avenue Court pursuant to an application submitted by Haversian Canal Systems LLP, ORA with Orthopedics, 510 Valley View Drive, Moline. Resolutions. Council Bill 1053-2020, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an agreement between the City of Moline and Quad City Towing Incorporated to provide towing services for the City of Moline for an initial 3-year term. Council Bill 1054-2020, a resolution authorizing the purchase of 3,000 tons of road salt through the Illinois Department of Central Management Services for the City of Moline's 2020-2021 winter season.
Motion to approve the consent agenda, Alderman Parker.
Second.
Second, Alderman Went.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker and a second by Alderman Potter. I'm giving it to Alderman Potter. You know what, Janine, I'm so sorry to do this, but when
Okay.
I was quickly looking through the minutes because I was trying to recall a specific vote, and I thought that one of the votes wasn't captured.
Oh, okay.
Is that something that I have to specify right now? Because it'll take me a minute to find it again, or is that something that we could just ask for validation on, if you could just go through? We have it all recorded, so I think if it is missing, we could.
I can do,
Fix it.
Dirk, I can bring that back next time, can I not? Or do we need
Yeah,
that?
I would just table this one to the next one while you get a chance to look at it.
Do I have the authority to table something after it's been motioned?
You're talking about the minutes from,
I'm talking about the minutes that are included in the consent
Yeah, there's
agenda.
always an intervening motion for a specific item to table a particular item.
I think I need to ask someone else to make that motion, though I don't think I have the authority. Alderman Potter, would you like to do that for me?
Is this committee of the whole or councilman?
It was the committee of the whole.
Your Honor, I would like to pull a committee of the whole minutes from the omnibus vote.
Second.
Thank you, Alderman Potter. Thank you, Alderman Moyer. Roll call, please, on the motion to, the intermediary motion? Is that what it is, or is it an amendment? I'm sorry.
Amended motion.
Okay. Is there a discussion on the amendment? So I need a roll call on the amendment, and then we'll do a roll call on the amended motion, please.
okay. Alderman Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Potter,
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
The amendment carries. We now have an amended motion on the floor. Roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Potter,
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
Motion carries. Sorry, I was
It's okay.
distracted by that screen.
Okay, then we need to do, oh, I guess we did the amendment on the omnibus. Okay,
Yep. I think we're good
Non-consent-
with the omnibus now.
thank you. Non-consent, we are doing the omnibus now? I thought we already,
You got it. We're done with that. So now we're going to do the individual items.
Well, the full item was pulled from the omnibus, now you need to table it. You pulled the one minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification. I would entertain a motion to table.
Committee of the whole minutes from last week's meeting.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Alderman Potter, a second by Alderman Williams to table the approval of the minutes from the committee of the whole last meeting. Any discussion? Oh, we don't have any discussion on table, sorry. Roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Alderman,
Sorry, aye.
thank
I
you.
was muted.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Potter,
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Non-consent agenda resolutions. Council Bill 1055-2020, a resolution authorizing the cancellation of the invitation for bids for project number 1338, 2020 sidewalk program, which results were publicly opened and read on April 14th, 2020, in accordance with section 27-3102 of the Moline Code of Ordinances.
Motion to approve 1055-2020, Alderman Parker.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker and a second by Alderman Moyer. Is there any discussion on this item? Roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer,
Aye.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron, Berg,
Alderman Berg, you may be muted.
Aye.
Thank you.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Potter,
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
Oh, motion carries.
Thank
You're
you.
getting my part
No,
tonight.
that's okay.
Thank you for your
You
patience.
kind of threw us with that one. Council Bill 1056-2020, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to a contract with Walter D. Lott Incorporated for project number 1335, 19th Avenue reconstruction, 13th Street to 14th Street, in the amount of $693,277.53.
Motion to approve 1056-2020, Parker.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Parker and a second by Alderman Moyer. Just for clarification, JD, do we have money for this?
For the,
The $693,000 for
well,
Council Bill
it's
1056, 19th Avenue reconstruction?
so the 72,458.80 out of the capital improvement fund, Carol's projecting that we'll have a shortfall in that fund. So if the projections end up materializing at the end of the year, then we won't have the funds for that 72,458.80.
Is this 72,458.80 associated with this specific project?
Yes. This, it is associated with this specific project, yes.
So in order to execute, we potentially could do an RAN for this? Or is this something that we need to wait to make a decision on until we understand that further?
You could, there's a couple different things that you could do to fund that shortfall. So, and that's one of the solutions, that's one of the options.
Would you?
Your Honor.
Yeah, Alderman Schoonmaker.
This amount coming from the CIP is small enough that it could just be an inter-fund transfer to cover it. And it affects some pretty large projects that are covered by those other funds.
Thank you. Alderman Went?
We also, $72,000, we have that in contingency that we could use just right now for this particular project because I think it's school sensitive for opening up. So we could take it temporarily out of contingency. That would be the easiest. And then we want to do something else later. We can do a revenue anticipation if we need to, but we've got that in contingency right now.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the council understood this particular one before they made a vote. Is there any further discussion on that? Roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer,
Nay.
Schoonmaker,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Potter,
Nay.
6 ayes, 2 nays,
That motion carries.
and that is all I have this evening, Your Honor.
Thank you, Janine.
Thank you.
I would like to turn it over to council's miscellaneous business this evening, and I'm just gonna step right through you. So if you have any miscellaneous business, I'm gonna call on you, and if you would respond then. Alderman Williams?
None.
Thank you. Alderman Parker?
Happy birthday, Mayor Acree.
Thank you. Alderman Went?
Ditto.
Thank you. Alderman Potter?
I would suggest that the council maybe go back through their previous emails. The email that the interim city administrator referred to as on April 13th, and it lays out all of the pertinent information you need with regard to the CIP projects and the proposed deficit in the CIF funding. It was a very well done email, and it was very enlightening. And for those, I realize we get lots and lots of emails, but that's where it would be. So go back to April 13th and reread that.
Thank you, Alderman Potter. Alderman Moyer?
Sure. A happy birthday, but I also wanted to mention that while Moline was incorporated in 1872, we were actually founded in 1848 on this day. So happy 172nd birthday, which apparently you planned.
Yes.
To be coincidental.
It wasn't my birthday, but yeah, it is. I share it. Thank you. Alderman, is that it for you, Alderman Moyer? Is it it for you?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Alderman Schoonmaker?
Oops. Happy birthday, Your Honor, that's all.
Thank you. Alderman Waldron? Don't feel obligated to wish me happy birthday. Seriously. It's overdone now.
Schoonmaker a couple weeks ago brought up about the landlords that are bearing a burden on the water and sewer costs on potential evictions. I've gotten 2 more calls this week reference that, and I think that is an item I would like to bring back to council and talk about.
Thank you, Alderman Waldron. I think that we're going to get more guidelines on the CDBG money, and there may be an opportunity to provide some relief there. I don't think there's an opportunity to provide relief by doing water shutoffs. So if that's the request, I think that's a no-go.
Well, that's not the request. Some of these folks, I think we should take a look at them case-by-case basis.
Okay.
There's some people that were in the process of eviction, and then the governor's order came, and now not only are the people not being evicted, they're not paying their water and sewer bill. The minute things are lifted, these people are going to take off. The landlords are going to be stuck with that. It's not generally I'm in favor of helping landlords typically, but in this case, I think a case-by-case basis, we should take a look at the individual circumstances and maybe write off some of these landlord costs. It's just something I wish the council would give some consideration.
Thank you, Alderman Waldron. Alderman Berg?
Happy birthday, Mayor. I have a question for JD. The PowerPoint that you provided to us, JD, could you actually email that to us?
I think Carol, did Randy Haley email that out to him?
It was emailed earlier today.
Okay, I must have missed it. Sorry, JD. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have a couple of different things. So I'm getting solicitations from entities in the community, not unlike Alderman Waldron's experiencing with landlords, but on a little bit bigger scale. So here's some examples of them. I don't want to be super specific, but, well, I guess I do. One of the sports organizations, actually two of the sports organizations, are asking for support specifically from the city. So it'd be direct support to them to help cover some of their business losses. And I also received a solicitation for support from one of the hotels. And I just want some guidance. I don't think that we need to debate whether or not the support is appropriate right now, but how you want me to communicate those solicitations. Do you want me to provide them to JD to add to, considerations at a later point when we have everything, or how? I just am looking for your feedback. I also have gotten solicitation from one entity that leases parking in the downtown area, and they would like to not pay for their parking during this COVID-19 time. So what do y'all think? Anybody? Alderman Potter?
I'm having difficulty understanding why I should be supporting the sports organizations without being specific. I think those are not-for-profits that are just have to retool and figure out some way to take care of it. Maybe not, but with regard to leased parking, if those spots are not being used, I don't see any advantage in us trying to take money from the folks who are normally paying for leased parking. That's my.
Alderman Potter, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
Can you just repeat that last? Did you hear any of it, Alderman Schoonmaker?
Just the end about regards to parking, and then I couldn't hear him.
With regards to parking, I think that, if the spots aren't being used, I see no value in trying to collect the leased parking fees.
Does anybody else have any feedback for me?
I do. Just second that and say that obviously if they're not coming to work and not using those spots, but I would also like to know what that's going to do. I have no idea what they pay for those spots or how many there are.
Carol, if you're on the call, I asked Carol at one point how much revenue we pull off of our leased parking spots, and it's something like $30,000 a year. So I don't think it would be terribly devastating, but it's not my authority. And so I think it probably should be integrated into our overall budget scheme if that's something that we can afford to waive. Maybe we consider it. Uh-oh, Dirk's about ready to launch up to the podium.
I want to make clear there's two sets of leases. There are leases of parking that came with incentives that we held up our end, and so some of the developers who are leasing need to hold up their end, and then there are leases where it's just an additional amount of revenue. So I want to be clear, we're talking about the latter, not the former, that the people who got their incentives need to pay, because I'm working my way through a couple of development agreements on that issue.
Do you all see a difference in those? Alderman Potter, I'm looking to you.
Yeah, I understand and I would concur with what the counselor said.
Okay, so your advice to the city is to consider waiving the fees for the standalone parking lease agreements that are not associated with the ongoing development agreement.
I assume that.
How does the rest of my council feel about that? Alderman Parker.
Well, going back to, I think your original question is how to handle these requests.
Yeah.
And if that is your question, I know that JD has a ton of things on his plate. This kind of sounds more an economic development area. I don't know if we have any bandwidth on that department, but JD, I don't want to overwhelm you with, trying to find all this money in the budget and, oh, by the way, worrying about parking leases downtown.
Alderman Schoonmaker.
Generally, when you sign a lease and it doesn't, you don't expect it to be waived. It's a term and you pay for it for that term and things happen. I do understand that we're potentially offering some forgiveness for some different things, but I think we need to be careful here not to set a precedent. And if we're going to do this, we should be reviewing it pretty closely know, are these folks that are asking for the lease to be waived, have they already received incentives from another program? I just think we need to be careful. We start doing this, we've got a slippery slope of waiving all kinds of things.
Yeah, what would you think about kind of staging this like we're doing with our other utility payments, that we won't charge late payments, but we'll discuss it, so it could be deferred without penalty and just kind of handle it that way? I'm just trying to think of how to keep it off of JD's desk for now during these very busy times, and yet do the right thing.
Yeah, I think, you know, choose a person to be in charge of that, and maybe, I forget who said it, was it maybe Parker that said Economic Development Division, and let somebody accumulate them, and I'll talk about different situations and see if something makes sense.
Okay, so I feel like the Economic Development Department would be responsible for the business continuity requests, like the sports teams, but the parking feels like that's more Public Works. Isn't that who handles the parking leases, JD?
Keith Verbeck does.
Oh, okay,
handles
so that's the
parking.
Finance Department. What do you mind if we split it up that way? And when I get these solicitations, I'll push them out to the department and leave the departments to come back to the council with their recommendations at the appropriate time. Is that an okay way to handle these things? Because they're coming to me. We all right with that?
Yes.
I'm getting some head nods here. Is anybody protest?
I'm good with the mayor just handling all this stuff. You got plenty of time, right?
I don't mind it, but I don't know if y'all will buy into it. But thank you for offering me that power. I don't think I have it. I also wanted to update you all on our virtual State of the City. We are working towards that. There'll be some cost savings involved because of doing it that way, so I think that's a good thing right now. And I've made some arrangements to have some individuals be involved. And what we'll do is we'll do taping. The company is D Films. They were going to do our taping anyway. They're going to continue with that quoted price for doing this virtual taping. They will, by virtual taping, I mean virtual filming presentation. That's how you'll watch it, is virtually. But the filming will be done in person, and so they've got a protocol set up of how to respect social distancing, but yet do the filming. So there'll be one person that will be going to the studio at a time to film their segments, and then it'll be edited together. It'll be presented to the community, specifically the Kiwanis members and the Rotary members on, I'm going to forget the date. I think it's April 11th. Is that right, Janine? May 11th. May 11th is the date at noon. So it'll be made available through our public access station at noon, and we'll get that out to the community. And then it'll also be available to watch at your convenience at a later time. So I hope everybody still feels comfortable with that plan, because it's progressing. Any feedback? Alderman Moyer.
We're just losing the ASBOC contingency, right?
We are, and I have been in contact with our town twin, Osbach, Germany, and they're doing well. They've had, I think they feel pretty comfortable about where they're at, but they have had a significant impact to their financial situation, as well as they have a significant death toll in Germany that is sad, as well as it is here. But anyway, I don't think they're coming. I know they're not coming on the 4th. I don't think they would be allowed to. So, but hopefully sometime you'll have an opportunity to meet them. They're a pretty cool bunch of people. Is there any other council business? Is there any staff comments, or JD, do you have anything for the council this evening?
Nope, Your Honor.
Okay. Anybody else on the staff team looking for the remotes? All right, if you guys wouldn't mind, I'm gonna share with you the remaining public comments. I'm gonna open it up for public comment. We don't have anyone here in attendance, so here we go. This message is from D. Canfield to Moline City Council. It is with shock and dismay that I have learned of the city's cuts of over $400,000 from its support of the library. I understand that we are in treacherous times that will have an impact on local and state governments. However, I urge you to understand the vital role that the library plays in the lives of citizens. It has been established historically that in times of economic recession and depression, libraries are the most heavily used and relied on. And in this information age, libraries play a vital role in the dissemination of reliable, objective, verifiable information. The public library is more important than ever. Our very democracy depends on the services it provides. D. Canfield, 2401 12th Avenue. Thank you, Dee. The next one is from Audrey Adamson. Dear Mayor Acree and the Moline City Council members, my name is Audrey Adamson. I am a proud Moline resident. I have chosen to live, work, commit to public service, and raise my family in this wonderful community. I was incredibly disheartened by the recent council discussion and your vote to, in essence, defund the Moline Public Library by discontinuing payment towards their mortgage and not providing specific levy funds to support their operations and services in the future. Then, in the middle of National Library Week, based on these budget decisions, our community saw the entirety of the library staff laid off for this foreseeable future. Although the library has not been able to have its doors open in this past month, valuable services were still being provided through electronic materials, virtual events, and sharing of information online. Librarians and staff have also been busy getting ready for the time when the library can reopen its doors, gearing up for a robust summer reading program to help address all of the time students have been away from their traditional school and planning hands-on activities. The adult area team have been readying themselves for the immense support of job seekers in our city will need. We were working to provide services in any way they could now and be ready for when our community needs them in the future. That all ends now. I know that the decisions made by governing bodies are complex and difficult in the best of times, and that in our current economy, choices need to be made. But it appeared that these budgetary decisions were being made without genuine interest with the library board and a full understanding of the resources the amazing staff at this facility provides. It also seemed that the council felt, in viewing your April 14th discussion, that the library and the experts who work there should not have as much control over how they spend funds, and there was not much concern on where future funds would come from. I urge the City Council to truly research this issue and explore options that make sense and are monetarily achievable. My family loves the library, the books, the programs, and the people. Per the library website, the Moline Public Library inspires lifelong learning, creates community, and transforms lives with quality resources and services. I want to live in a city that values these things, and I hope you do too. Audrey Adamson, 2610 15th Avenue. Thank you, Audrey. The next, let's see if I'm getting these right. She is one of, I think, a family. And so this one is also from the same address. Jim Adamson, 2610 15th Avenue. Hello, I'm a Moline lifer. I am greatly disturbed to hear about the defunding of the Moline Library. A strong public library is a pillar of a great community. It serves as a testament to the equalizer of education. And Moline's library serves as an exemplary example, providing top-notch programming to all over the past 15 years. It is Library Appreciation Week. We should be celebrating the library's amazing staff and all they do, not defunding what makes our city great. Our community will get through the current trying times because we are Moliners, but things will be rough on the other end. Times like that are to come, times like what are to come are exactly when we need to increase public investment. Our fellow citizens will need the programming and services offered by the great people at our great public amenity. Thank you for your time, Jim Adamson. Thank you, Jim. The next one is from Grant Adamson. Greetings, my name is Grant. I am about to turn 12 years old. I really don't think you should stop funding the library, as I think it's an important part of our community. I go there often, and I think the people who work there are very nice and helpful. and always help me when I need help finding something. It is a great place, and some of the events they hold are very enjoyable. Please keep funding the library as our community depends on it. Sincerely, Grant Adamson, student, Woodrow Wilson Middle School. Thank you, Grant. The next one is from, and I'm not sure about the last name, I believe it's Sean Roselieb. Moline City Council. It is my understanding that Moline, like most cities across the world, is facing difficult decisions regarding revenue and budget shortfalls. I don't envy the position that any of you as elected leaders are in. I understand that you are considering drastic cuts to meet those deep shortfalls in these unprecedented times. Your first responders have stood strong with other essential employees in the battle of keeping each of you and all of your citizens safe since this COVID outbreak. Your first responders remain on the front line doing the tireless work that needs to be done to get us through this pandemic. Your essential employees have stood for you, and now it's the right time for you to stand for them. Best wishes for good health, Sean Roselieb, Executive Director, Illinois Fraternal Order of Police Labor Council, 5600 South Wolf Road, Suite 120, Western Springs, Illinois. Thank you, Mr. Roselieb. The last comment we have this evening is from Kara Kuykendall. I think Kuykendall. I'm sorry, Kara. Hello, my name is Kara Kuykendall. I reside in the First Ward. I first would like to express my disappointment with the current situation at Moline Public Library. I'm saddened that the city has laid off the entire staff and effectively closed the library during a time our community needs it most. You may not know that this week we are celebrating National Library Week, and today is National Library Workers' Day. I think stripping staff of their job and benefits is a sad token of appreciation. I know our city is in a difficult financial situation, but I know that we can do better than this for the professionals that work every day to make our community a better place to live, work, and raise a family. I would now like to share some of the amazing things our library does for this community. Help community members attain digital literacy skills. Teach children a love for reading, literacy, and civic engagement. Help community members prepare for and pass the citizenship test. Help create a more equitable community by providing access to public computers and free internet. Providing community members of all ages access to credible and reputable information. Providing free access to digital resources, books, databases, etc. to our students who are currently home from school. Provide 2020 census assistance and promotion. Provide voter registration services. This is a short list of things our library does to ensure we have a thriving community. I urge our council members to please remember that our public library is not something to take for granted. Libraries are community hubs that help our citizens of all ages learn and grow and ultimately make our town a great place to call home. Thank you, Kara Kuykendall. Thank you, Kara. Those are our public comment for this evening. Is there any further business for City Council? Alderman Williams.
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion that the council convene an executive session for the purpose of discussion of collective negotiating matters 5 ILCS 120/2C2.
Second.
We have a motion by Alderman Williams, a second by Alderman Potter. Roll call, please.
Alderman Moyer?
Aye.
Schoonmaker?
Aye.
Waldron?
Aye.
Berg?
Aye.
Thank you.
Williams?
Aye.
Parker?
Aye.
Went?
Aye.
Potter?
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays.
That motion carries. We'd now like to convene an executive session. If you are on the call and you are not part of the City Council and you are not Margaret or Allison, would you please, actually, I think we need to keep Brian too, don't we?
I'd ask Brian to stay on, and I think Chief Snyder's